The order of the scenes is very much out of chronology. There's some from when she's a little girl, some from when she's a teen, some from when she's a young adult. And so we bounced around those for a little while. And it's not too surprising that we saved the arm for a little later into things. So we were actually playing certain scenes where her arm is missing, but we didn't know how. So we eventually worked our way through these. This was a certain amount of resonance for all of us. That led us to the interesting side point that in many cases, and considering we actually had a number of like-minded people at the table about this, which is that instead of the fragility of a given person at the table being in the caring hands of a bunch of abled people, we considered that to be kind of a patronizing, dehumanizing activity, and instead flipped it around, which is that we knew who to turn to in order to learn about being tough. And that's very much the way that we interacted and played among one another. Me being the national and also the social outsider. I mean, the only person I knew to start with was Edoardo. The inclusion of our feelings about this into play was very bonding, actually. So playing this character is quite brutal because you are putting someone through hell in many ways. It's a quite fierce game, and maintaining sympathy for the person as opposed to turning them into this scarred, tattooed, travesty, shred, leftover of a human being is an interesting choice, an interesting line to kind of be gazing over, because the word warrior implies otherwise in some ways. But you can be quite close to that line and still be a warrior. So we're playing non-analytically, but very genuinely at that point. Oh man. So she endured a tracheotomy as a teen. She got her tattoo of the elite on the back of her hand. Apparently, that we invented in making this, that there's a special non-counterfeitable tattoo that they get, and that we learn later that people have fake ones that aren't very, that don't pass, but people wear them as kind of a pseudo insider, pseudo defiant thing. That was wrapped up with her romantic history. Call attention to the tattoos that I put on there early on, a couple of scenes in, and we found that's where we found that she had a romantic partner from the down below, which isn't like, the down below with everybody wrapped in rags and wheezing and, shuffling from place to place in the shadows. It's ordinary life for you and me. And with all of its fascinating, globalized, financialized features jacked into high gear. But again, to the people in it, this seems normal, as if they are living the same lives that people have lived in middle-class society all this time. Well, anyway, so she's in this relationship, and I drew these tattoos on her lower body. And what I did, because this game has rules for this, you don't, or you recognize that heavy feelings are involved, or could be, so you don't, however, shut it down. This is not a very X-Cardish game. And I've mentioned before how Italian designers have kind of set that concept aside and said, we can do better than that. We can do better than a shut up. And the approach here was very much, okay, ask a little, slow down. So I did a slowdown, and in this case, of many available techniques. and reversed the pen, put the end on basically her abdomen, lower abdomen, and said, "I'm planning on doing some tattooing here. Where are we at with this?" And the table acquiesced, or enthusiastically encouraged and supported. And I drew these tattoos that are not very well drawn on the picture, but they are basically a set of angled brackets or framing devices for her genitals, and then proceeding down her inner thighs. So the idea here being that this related to this romance that she had with basically a punk musician. And the way we played this actually put a lot of history and different emotions. He's mad at her because she won't give him a hand up into the elite. She says, "You don't want to do that," and she wants to kind of be down here and, in the punk world, wearing her fingerless glove over her tattoo, and it's not going well. I mean, it goes really, really well until it doesn't. Well, anyway, that's important for later, which is why I went into the detail. Various other travails. And sooner or later, as we were kind of looking at this person, we did a situation where she was bumped way up into her 40s. So this really extended our biography and the scope of the story. And it raised a really interesting and difficult conceptual point, which has everything to do with the way that the outcome occurred. The difficult point that I don't think was clear to the table. I sort of assumed it was one thing, and maybe other people assumed differently, but we just didn't know. Were we including the biography of the person, including their effective warrior activities, or was all of this prequel to them becoming a warrior? And then we would never see the warriorness. We just knew that was there after everything we've done. Or in a story, as you know, regardless of how long it takes in chronology, the question is, do we pretty much assume that the warriorness against the power in question is happening, and that the impact on the society that earns this person the title, the warrior, is that occurring? So we didn't really know, and I kind of assumed that it was, so that by the time we got into her 40s, that there was quite a history of effective warriorness in the fiction. Or was this to be all prequel, so that, her life went on for a really long time before her warrior effectiveness finally happened? I don't think we ever resolved that. We didn't know, and more importantly, we didn't ask. We didn't know we needed to ask. The way play worked out, first of all, to make the actual fiction brief, it ended up with her getting this huge award from the elite for her services, as they thought, on their behalf. And instead, and as part of this, she was getting the award given to her by this guy. And the guy we talked about before, he's this face on the billboards. He's sort of who the warrior would be if the warrior were institutional. So he's sort of the face of, success at the top. He's this, I imagined him as the actor who's currently playing Captain America, or someone very much like that, physically and charismatically. Sort of a Captain Bob, except that Bob is also at the top. But he's our guy. He's of the people. He's one of us, but he's at the top. Anyway, so that was, this face has been on billboards and stuff like that all over. It's part of the culture that we've been playing. Well, this dude is going to, who anybody knows is just an actor, is going to come and give her this award. And you can see where this is going. It was a little bit more of a surprise at the table. In retrospect, it's a big of course, but at the time, actually, people just didn't see it coming. Jaws dropped. We were just kind of into it, I guess, of the moment. And so, it's the old boyfriend, of course, who did get up to the elite in his way. And she didn't know that. He's quite airbrushed in the presentation. And he didn't know that it was her. I guess you would say that he never knew her actual name. So anyway, they see and recognize each other, in the moment where everybody's applauding and, he's going to give her the award. And they finally look at each other for the big camera moment where they're acknowledging each other as, the best and the best, and it's them. At which point the pen gets passed, and the person narrating at that point chose to turn. Oh, by the way, the scar that I drew in beginning narrating that was the one on her cheek, so that which is very much indicative of taking a blow, I think. But anyway, so I had that. Well, the narration following that was basically a physical attack and struggle to the death. And this was for the guy, and an arrest for her. And the game doesn't have any sort of do-overs, take-backs, things like that, which is great because I'm not fond of those. If you're going to have a randomizing system, which this game does in its organization of dialogue, then play it as it lays. And so this happens, and the question that made it kind of weird for me, I mean, I'm playing with people, we all get to say our piece, so whatever happens. The question is, wait, is this how her warrior career ends, or is it how it begins? Which is my big system question for the game. Because it would matter a lot with a narration like that, and probably whatever the person at the table thinks it is going to inform whether they're going to narrate, deliver, provide, establish that kind of outcome. So we ended kind of on a little bit of a weird note. I mean, a couple of the other of us at the table were kind of blinking a little bit, no protests or whatever, but we're kind of see kind of a Scooby kind of look. And the final part of the game is when each of us describes the person. And we say, who is this warrior to you? And it was clear that some of us stood on one line of the used up, discarded, and effectively martyred hero, the one who endured. And some of us stood on the, survivor, achiever, look at the impact that they made hero of a warrior. So that's okay, right? To end up with differing things and realizing that your story itself is on either side of an important line of one kind or another, conceptual line. Well, that's how that played out, and the game in its current state is available in English and along with silhouettes and things. It's got a lot to teach about randomization methods, and it's got a real nice focus with a lot of really open room for your own game, your own experience. So have a good time. Tell us how it goes.